Hello everyone and welcome back to our tutorial series on the A10-CII. And today we're going to be taking a look at the A10's signature weapon, the Mavericks. Now you've got the choice of CCD Mavericks or thermal Mavericks. The employment of these is exactly the same. The only difference is the CCD Mavericks have a regular sort of TV style visual range camera, whereas the thermal Mavericks have IR cameras. Really, the thermal Mavericks I find more useful. They're a bit easier to see things and easier to get locks on the things you want to be targeting. But everything I say you can equally apply to the CCD Mavericks. We also get a choice of the large warhead or the small warhead. I'll go for the small warhead this time purely because that gives us more Mavericks to play with, but again the employment is identical between the two. So I'm going for this bottom slot of 4 Thermal Mavericks Small. As always, the link to this mission will be in the description. Okay, now that we're in, I'm going to click fly and enter active pause. Now that we have everything paused up, we can take our time and get things set up. So the main thing you need to remember with Mavericks is before you reach the target zone, you need to turn on the Maverick. To do that, turn to your left MFCD and click the USB under the Mav option. And where it says EO, by default on your mission, this will say EO off. You press that once, that will begin the Seeker boot up time. It will take approximately 5 minutes for this to complete, and so you want to do this before you ever reach the target area, but equally you do have a maximum time. As this is running, it is bleeding out coolant, and so you can't just leave these on indefinitely. So really, when I'm about 5 minutes out, maybe a little bit more like 10 minutes out, I like to turn these on. I do that as part of my normal fencing in procedure. So when I'm doing Master Arm on, when I'm turning on my TGP and lasers, I make sure that I also go to the Maverick screen and turn this on. The last thing that you want to do is be ready to line up on a target and suddenly realize you have to wait around for 5 minutes for the Maverick to heat up. In terms of the DSMS settings, there really aren't many that we need to do with the Maverick. So we can go to the DSMS settings, go to the Maverick, view the profile, but really these controls don't really make much of a difference. You're going to be firing them using the Maverick control. Always want to be firing in single, and you can set a minimum altitude if you want to. I never really worry about that for these. First step to Maverick employment is we need to identify our targets. So as normal here, we've got the HUD set as soy. So we can select waypoint 1 as our first waypoint. We do that by pressing the data management switch up command. And here we've got waypoint 1 marked, and so these are our ideal targets over here. We then want to arm the Maverick, so we make sure that Master Arm is on. With the HUD set as soy, we can press the data management switch right command to cycle weapon profile, until we see here that Maverick is selected. Now you can try and employ Mavericks purely using the Maverick as the seeker head. To do this, we go to the Mav panel down here. We make the Maverick screen active, or soy, by pushing the coolie left long command until we see the green box around the outside and not soy message disappears. At this point, we can move this display by using your slew controls. They work very much like the regular targeting display slew controls, so we can move this around, and we can see a little ring on our HUD which indicates where the Maverick is looking. Very similar to the TGP, if I push China Hat forward short command, this will zoom in on the boxed area. Pressing China Hat forward short again will zoom out. and I can push China hat forward long command to slew all sensors, including the Maverick Seeker head, to my current speed, which right now is these targets up ahead. And so we can perhaps just make out that we've got a few little white dots there. This is the thermal camera option, and so these white dots are high contrast objects, so these are likely vehicles right here. Equally, I can get some over here that are moving around. So I'm having trouble getting locks on those very distant targets, but there is another group just down here that we can visually see. And so we can start trying to get a lock on these units here. So to do so, we position the Seeker head over the target we're interested in, and then we push the target management switch up short command to attempt to lock. It will try to lock onto a high contrast object in front of it. You may need to make several attempts. You know that it has a lock as the crosshairs here get narrower. The display here begins to flash, and if your target is moving, this will track that moving target. As for what this cross here is, this displays the position of the Seeker head relative to the bore sight. So if this is in the dead center, the Seeker head is looking dead center. Because it's down and to the left a little bit, this is telling me the Seeker head is slewed a little bit down and to the left. Which makes sense, we're aiming at this target here, the bore sight will be somewhere over here. So it's moved a little bit just to align with that target. You can use this to make sure that this cross is vaguely in the center. That means that your Maverick is not going to have to turn much immediately after launch. You don't want this right near the side as it might fail, and if this cross moves out of the boxed area, you'll get a gimbal limit error and the Seeker head won't be able to track. Do note with these Mavericks that these are very much a more limited Seeker head than your targeting pod display, so you are going to be fairly limited on what angles you can move at. But let's just employ this weapon so we can see how to do this with the pure Maverick sight. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause. We've got our target locked. Just make sure that's in the middle, and then I press and hold weapon release, and there's rifle 1. That will go to the target. This is a fire and forget weapon, so I don't need to do anything else. After a couple of seconds, the next Maverick in turn will be selected, and it will be slewed to approximately the same location as your previous one. And so that'll make its way. These aren't very fast missiles, but it should eventually hit the target. There we go, direct hit. So that is employing the Maverick with simply the Maverick Seeker itself. But really you're not going to be doing that very often with the A10-CII because we have this lovely targeting pod. So I'm just going to reset the mission and let's target our real targets here using the targeting pod. So same thing, started mission, put it in pause, set the HUD as soy, data management switch up so I've got this boxed in on our next target, and this time I am going to employ the weapon using the targeting pod. So let's select our weapon, as normal, data management switch right, got the Maverick selected, and I can go to air to ground mode on my targeting pod. Select my targeting pod with the coolie right long command. Then I can slew all targets to my current SPI. My SPI right now is set as the waypoint by pushing China forward long command. Can then go to thermal view if I want to by pushing the boat switch forward or aft. China hat forward short will zoom me in. Data management switch up and down will change the optical sight. And so here I can find a target, and let's put it in on this track here. I push the target management switch up short command, will change to point track mode, and so it's going to be trying to follow this track here. And then I can make the targeting pod line of sight my SPI by holding target management switch up long command. With that done, this is now my SPI. If I go over to my Maverick screen, I can then push China hat forward long command again to slew all sensors to my SPI, which is now this TGP line of sight. On the HUD I can see that the round Maverick reticule is now following the diamond reticule, which is our targeting pod. And the targeting pod is following this high contrast object. Now that we've got that nicely locked up, we can take a moment to look at the symbology on the side here. This is our ranging information, very much like we had with the GPS guided bombs. It is shown on the Maverick display and repeated on the heads-up display. We've got our slant range to the target in nautical miles here. Got the absolute maximum range at the top, but this is the most likely engagement range in this box area here. Typically this is within 7 nautical miles is when the Maverick can get a lock. The Maverick's range is really determined by when the seeker head can get a lock, and so you can sometimes get locks at longer distances, but it really depends on how big the object is, how highly contrasting it is with the particular seeker head type. So ideally you put it between the box, try not to fire it below the boxed area, as your Maverick may not have enough time to adjust its course and get on the target. Generally, the shorter range you are, the more centered you want this to be. Now either way, this is not currently locked on the target, so I cannot launch. It is just following the TGP line of sight. So to lock it on the target, what I need to do is push coolie left long to select this. I can zoom in, China hat forward short command, and I can attempt to lock at this distance. To attempt to lock, that is target management switch up short command. I've just tried that, and I know that's failed because I do not have the flashing light and the box is not, the crosshairs are not zooming in. That means that this hasn't managed to get targeting. I need to get closer before this has a clear enough view in order to lock. So to do that, let's unpause and fly towards the target. So I'm flying towards the target. This will stay tracking the sight, and I can just repeatedly hit the up command. If I think this is wandering off, which it does seem to be, I can push China hat forward long. That will center it on my current SPI, and I can just keep searching. There we go, now I've got a lock. I'm within 7 nautical miles, so I can fire. As soon as I've fired, I am clear to either disengage or pick a new target. So for instance here, I can just pick one of the other vehicles, double check that as my SPI, coolie left long command to select the Maverick sight, zoom in since the new Maverick is off center, China hat forward long to align this, target management switch up to lock, and fire again. Then I can pull away, make sure I get out of range of any return fire. And if I want to see my target, go back over to the targeting pod, China hat forward short to zoom out a bit, data management switch down to zoom out a bit more, one shot, they scatter, this was my target, but it doesn't matter that they're scattering, the Maverick has its own little seeker head, it will track moving objects with absolutely no difficulty. Actually not entirely sure, I think it picked one of the other targets. Either way, we've got multiple destroyed targets in that area. And if I want, I can go back in, and you can absolutely just use the targeting pod as a general guide, and then follow up by using the Maverick controls separately. So let's try that. I've set this truck here as my SPI, using the same controls as before. I am then going to select my Maverick, turn towards the target. Do be careful not to turn too aggressively, because you can get into a gimbal roll either on the Maverick seeker head or on your targeting pod. Then when I'm starting to point towards the target, I do China hat forward long command. You can see there it's locked on the target, or aligned to the target. Target management switch up, locked, fire, the next one's there, and I can just slew my pod to the side, lock onto the next target, and fire. If your scope is wandering, you can push the target management switch down command. That will ground stabilize it. Can sometimes help if you're having a bit of issue with your plane moving around. We can see there we're now getting multiple hits, different vehicles being impacted. This can be incredibly useful for taking out large groups of enemies in one pass. So that was really the Maverick. This is your sort of most powerful weapon in the A10-CII. It gives you a lot of standoff capability. You can launch at 7 nautical miles out, which can outrange some enemy SANs. As soon as you launch, you have the freedom to disengage, turn around, and with a bit of practice, you can quite happily get all 6 of your maximum Mavericks fired off in a single pass, do a lot of damage to, say, a tank column, then be out of there before your weapons even hit the targets. If you have any questions about this, do just leave them down below in the description. If you're finding this series useful, do consider liking and subscribing, and otherwise I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, remember to be kind to yourself and everyone else. Cheers!